In the last nugget, you saw the UCS Manager. Well, we're going to take a more thorough tour in this particular nugget on UCS Manager and UCS Management in general. So, two main goals in this nugget: to make sure we understand the various UCS management options that exist before us, and then to take a more detailed tour of the UCS Manager and even look under the hood a little bit. See how the UCS Manager really works. This knowledge is not all that critical, but I suppose it could be leveraged in troubleshooting scenarios. And I also want you to know the great integration possibilities that exist with the UCSM. Remember first where the UCS Manager lives. It lives on your fabric interconnects. We're going to have an active fabric interconnect database. There is a database of information, things like what are all the settings inside all the servers in a chassis, and what are the settings and variables for the chassis itself. Now, how does the GUI, the CLI, and the third-party tools, how do they interact with that database of UCS management information? Well, they do it utilizing extended markup language. Yes, there's an XML application programming interface that is utilized here. It was so smart of Cisco to do this. So really, the language of UCS is XML data. Very, very clever, and now you know. By the way, I'm not just going into detail about this for the real world. Obviously, this is extremely real world relevant, but this is also going to be a focus area in certification. So our primary methodologies are the GUI, the CLI, and the third-party tools, all made possible thanks to the XML API. Great. But do we have other management opportunities? Are there other management protocols that expose themselves? Absolutely, there are. Simple network management protocol is supported in the system, as you might guess. We know there's keyboard, video, and mouse over IP support. There's IPMI that we already mentioned in another nugget. That's the Intelligent Platform Management Interface specification. There's something called the SMASH CLP. That stands for Server Hardware Command Line Protocol. There's a CIM, Common Information Model, XML standard that is supported. There's the serial over LAN that's supported. There's Cisco's call home invention, where if a particular element in the UCS system is sick, it will notify Cisco's Technical Assistance Center for you in an automated fashion. So what do we get from this? Well, the UCS is designed from the ground up to be as manageable as humanly possible. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's get to that UCS, graphical user interface, that we know is going to be one of the mainstays of management interaction that we have with the UCS system. Over on the far left, we have the navigation pane, right? So we can expand the chassis that we have in our system. We can expand chassis 1. We can expand its I/O modules. We can expand a particular I/O module. We can expand a particular backplane port. We can select a particular backplane port. And now what I want you to notice is two things over on the right. Notice that there is a navigation trail up top, allowing you another way in which to go through that hierarchy of systems that you can manage. Then below that, we have the content pane. Now, what's interesting about the content pane, remember, the UCS system, I should say, is so darn powerful. So if we go to a port, notice things change, right? Obviously, our navigation trail changes and our content pane changes. And for this particular port on the I/O module, we have a general tab, a fault tab, an event tab, a finite state machine tab, and a statistics tab. The tabs that you would have in a particular content pane obviously are going to vary depending on where we are in the navigation hierarchy. Now, notice where we are in the navigation pane. We are on a tab. Yeah, right now we are on a tab, and the tab that we are on is the equipment tab. And this is where we are browsing the physical equipment that makes up our UCS system. Makes sense, right? The very next tab that we have is the servers tab. And you look at this servers tab and you're pretty intimidated if it's the first time you've seen it. There's service profiles, service profile templates, there's policies, there's pools, there's schedules, all this exciting stuff that you may everything involving the LAN, like VLANs. Yeah, we know the UCS system is going to honor those VLANs. And how about LAN based quality of service? Sure, we can do that here in the LAN tab. The SAN tab will be for storage area networking concerns, such as virtual storage area networks. And then we have a VM tab. This is for integration with Yes, you guessed it, VMware's vSphere product. So we can recognize things like virtual machines in here, port profiles, VMware clusters, and we can even utilize and really take advantage of virtual interface cards that we know are literally going to present virtual host bus adapters or virtual NICs to our environment. Finally, there's a straight up admin tab. And the admin tab will allow us to do things like track faults, events, audit logs, take care of user management, time zone management, license management. So lots going on here for very, very strict, really classic network management control. Add new equipment. That new equipment is discovered by the UCS management system, and information is placed into the UCS management database. And we even know it's stored in there in an XML fashion. Pretty awesome. Now, understand that as you add new equipment, the discovery is ongoing inside the UCS system. So it's constantly doing the discovery process because things are going to be changing. Things may fail, right? A fan could fail, and the UCS system needs to discover that fact. We do have the ability as administrators to make changes in the UCS environment and then trigger discoveries so that we are updated right away. This is all something we consider part of the discovery process, whether it's an automated discovery or we're manually triggering the discovery. Remember also, too, there is that concept of the finite state machine that we can utilize in order to detect any problems that may be going on with a very involved process. So if you drill in and let's go to one of the FEXs here, and sure enough, on the FEX2 here, if we go up to the FSM tab, the finite state machine tab, here is where we could go to monitor. And backup and importing of backed up information into the system. These are the types of tasks that are subject to finite state machine validation. And what's great about that is you can go in thanks to the finite state machine tab where appropriate, and you can track these particular processes. So we have the time. Let's have fun with a little exam time to wrap up this nugget. So our question is, which would not be considered a primary method for management of a B series blade in the UCS? And we need to choose two. Now, when we are tackling certification questions, we have to be in detective mode, right? We have to look at every single clue, every single piece of evidence we might have. And a big clue here is primary. Yeah, which would notice the key word here really is primary. We know the UCS Manager graphical user interface is primary. For that matter, we could also use the CLI if we want to be even faster, if we know the commands at the command line to do management. So now, which is another primary method? Well, we know it's the XML API because, as a matter of fact, it's really used by either of those. Now we can do a sanity check. Would IPMI and SNMP not be considered primary? Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't be, would they? They're great, they're awesome, but they're not really primary. So the two answers that are correct here are IPMI and SNMP. They're awesome, but they're not primary network management vehicles that we would use against the UCS system. A really example here of a tough question, right? Very, very difficult question, but notice how just don't panic when you're in an exam environment and you're presented something like this. Just draw upon the excellent experience you have now thanks to these nuggets that you're enjoying with me. So we had two main areas in this particular nugget, didn't we? We took a look at the very many management options that exist for our UCS system. We kind of thought about those now in two different ways. Primary methods of management versus non-primary methods of management. We also took a nice detailed tour of the UCS Manager. We saw how it was divided into a navigation pane with some important tabs up on the top, and then a navigation trail and a content pane that would have all kinds of interesting details for us to scrutinize. By the way, I'm sure you saw this, but when you're in the content pane, there will be buttons down below. So when you make configuration changes, you'll have those classic buttons down below to do things like apply those particular changes. We haven't done a lot of reconfiguration. In fact, we haven't done any reconfiguration because that's not really our job here at the CCNA level. But when we get into more advanced training on these data center topics and we start changing and manipulating things, we start being really active in the UCS Manager, and that, of course, requires happy buttons to get the job done. I hope this nugget has been informative for you, and I want to thank you for viewing.